So in this video, I'll be telling you why I sold my company and sharing some very vulnerable and personal stories of what happened along the way. The reason I want to share that, and I've talked about this in other videos, I feel like there's definitely no shortage of people on the internet trying to be the expert or specialist and tell you how they did what they did just so that they can sell you a course or a program. And that's not what I'm doing in this video. I literally just want to be a resource of reality, sharing a real life experience, why I sold my company, what it was like, the emotional journey that I went through on the exit, because it was a very emotional journey, because I was literally closing a chapter in my life that lasted about a decade. And during that decade, in a lot of ways, it was kind of a coming of age for me, because I started my HVAC company when I was 30 years old, and I sold it. I'm 39 now, and that's how old I was when I sold it. In a lot of ways, I grew up and gained some maturity, or I definitely learned some life lessons, because I thought I had it all figured out when I started the company. When I sold the company, I realized how little I knew. And I'll tell you how much I sold it for and how those numbers actually panned out. And then I'll even tell you what my revenue numbers were. And I'll be very transparent and just straightforward about the whole process. And I'll even tell you what I'm doing now. But basically, the main reason I sold my company and I had a, heating and air conditioning business. So I was in the HVAC space, and we did residential heating and air conditioning. And we were a $3 million company at the time that we were sold. So we were doing about $3 million gross revenue on an annual basis. And my plan with the company, was to take it to 9 figures in revenue. I mean, I really wanted to take it to 100 million in revenue. I wanted to be in multiple states. I wanted to be in multiple metros and continue to operationalize the business and become a national brand. And my daughter was born and basically changed my life. And within a couple days of that, life event, I just had a lot of clarity and realized I didn't know what I was doing running an HVAC company, because it was not my calling. It's not what I wanted to do with my life. And I just had a lot of clarity that I didn't want to deal with the same headaches I had been dealing with. For me, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. HVAC is not my passion as much as I enjoyed certain aspects of it, and there was things about it that I enjoyed doing. It wasn't my calling. It wasn't what I felt called to do, and it wasn't what I enjoyed. I learned so much along the way. It was a very humbling experience, because like I said, when I started that, I thought I was going to go from 0 to 100 in a handful of years, and I thought I was going to be very successful in that respect. And I don't know if easy is the word. I thought it was going to happen quicker than it did. And what I realized was I didn't know how to manage people. I didn't know how to operationalize a business. I didn't know how to systematize a business. I didn't know a thing about standard operating procedures or creating what goes into the different aspects of actually running a business. But I learned the basics of it, and along the way, I made little improvements. Where we started the business, we were on a cash basis. Eventually, we switched over to accrual accounting, which gives you much more accurate optics. But the real reason, like I said, that I sold the company was I was just in a really dark place where I was really stressed out all the time. It stopped being something that I enjoyed. And because the last 2 years, we were basically breaking even and had really tight margins both years, and we're not making any money. It was just not, obviously it's like I'm working super, super hard. I'm working for free. And so this is not fun anymore. And there was, some personal situations that came up in the business, which always come up in the business in terms of, getting stabbed in the back or betrayals, and managing people is difficult. I'll just put it that way. I try not to hold grudges against people, whether they were people that worked for me or people that I worked with. Long and short of it was a very emotional journey running the business. And that's why I ultimately decided to get out, because it's just not what I wanted to do, and it's not what makes me happy. And what I'm going to talk about in this business is kind of like the thought process I went through when I sold it, because the truth is, when you hit that crossroad where a business is no longer passionate, like you're going to hit that crossroad where things are just not fun anymore, and like a business is not passionate and it's not enjoyable. You don't want to run it, and you're thinking about heading for the hills, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's time to sell. And there's a way that you determine whether it's time to sell. And for me, the way I figured that out was I kind of started looking at kind of a before and after. And so I looked at, okay, what if I was out of the business tomorrow? How would I feel? And I looked at like my emotional system, like would I feel relieved or would I feel anxious? Would I feel like I gave up on my dreams? A lot of times, and this was how it was for me, like you might feel both ways. Like if you're going through something similar where you're thinking about selling your company, I found that I felt this level of anxiety with selling the business that was substantially lower compared to the anxiety I would have from running the business. And so because it was like, maybe there was like 10% regret, 90% sense of relief if like the business was sold tomorrow, I had a lot of emotional clarity of like, oh, I need to get out of this. This is not healthy for me. I'm really unhappy. And that was how I started to get clarity on it. And the two options that you have when you get into that moment where you're like, I want to sell or I want out, is you can either sell or get the business ready to sell, or you can figure out a way to reinvigorate passion. And I mean, I learned that not because I'm some guru and I'm like super wise. I learned that from going to an event. I went to a Tony Robbins event called Business Mastery, and he talks about that because on day one of Business Mastery, he has people stand up who are like maybe not passionate about their business anymore, and basically tells them like, you either need to get out or you need to find out how to reinvigorate passion. And some people, I mean, they go to that event and then they, within a few days, they make the decision to sell their business because the passion is just not there anymore, or they drastically change things up and they make some different moves. That's not when I had the clarity. I was at the hospital when my daughter was born and I just started to have the clarity, but I had been to the event before. I had remembered that thought, and I knew that I had been doing things in the past year leading up to the decision I made to sell it to reinvigorate passion. And one of those things was opening a new market, because when I started realizing that I needed to operationalize the business, I was also getting bored just staying small and staying in one metro. And so I wanted to diversify into a new market. At the same time, I was building out more systems, more operations, being things like creating a system for sales, creating a system for marketing, creating a system for all the things that make a business grow and scale so that you can duplicate it in different markets with different people and create leaders in those markets so that I could actually build a business. So I had expanded to a new market. We were in Phoenix at the same time that I was operationalizing things. So it was definitely maybe some extra headaches from that, but not terribly more than what I was dealing with. But when I was going through that situation where I was like opening a new market, it definitely reinvigorated that passion because I felt that growth, and not so much growth, but I felt that, or I got that taste of variety, of doing something different versus doing the same thing day in, day out and feeling like I'm stagnant. I felt like I was going to figure it out and I was going to move forward. And the truth was I did figure it out, just not in the way that I thought. And that was a humbling experience, right? And a part of me, one of the questions I had for myself when I was selling was like, is it worth another 10 years of my life to get the company to something, a bigger size and sell it for, a much higher multiple? Because I didn't even walk with a multiple at the time that I sold. I sold the company for 1.7 million, but I had over $1 million in debt. And so at the numbers, the way things crunched, the way I arrived to that price was not because of what it was actually worth. It was because of what I needed to sell it for in order to actually get out and be able to hand over the keys and pay all my debts and not file bankruptcy and be able to pay the IRS. Because even if you're, $1 million in debt, the IRS still treats that sale as taxable income. So I had to cough up, a few $100,000 to the IRS. It's one of those things that, like, at the end of the day, it was like, I just wanted out, and I was very clear on that. And there were several other things that I wanted to do, like making YouTube videos, for example, and doing other creative things that bring me a lot more joy, a lot more passion, and play to my strengths, which my strengths are really connecting with other people and communication. That's what I enjoy doing, right? And so that's why I would call that a strength. Whether or not I'm the best communicator, that's up to you guys to decide. But on the receiver's end of the communication to decide, the bottom line is I enjoy it. It fulfills my spirit and doesn't burn me out. And so it's time better spent doing that versus doing something that's going to literally, zap my soul and make me unhappy. So if you're in a position where maybe you empathize with this video and you're finding yourself not as passionate or happy with where you used to be in your company, and you're trying to scale or you're trying to grow, and maybe you hit an inflection point, where I found myself or where I found a lot of value in terms of scaling and growing, because my options when I was trying to sell the business was like I said, I have no course to sell you. That's not what this video is about. If you want help exiting your business, I do work with business brokers and can help connect you with someone, or even just talk to you if you want to hear more about my experience and how I sold my company. Just want to bounce you're in and you're thinking about selling your company. I know it can be a very nerve-wracking decision depending on where you're coming from and what your motivation is for selling. And if you want to be connected with a business broker that we work with, there is a link in the description where you can connect with us. But basically, I'm going to share a couple resources that, again, I receive no benefit for sharing these with you. I'm just sharing them with you because they were super helpful to me, went along the way. Because my options were, if I was unable to sell the business at the time, I was going to trim the fat and keep it very lean and make sure that it was profitable and able to run sustainably. And I was going to scale it along the way the last couple years so that I had a few good financials, and I would take it to market a few years later after having stitched up everything and making sure that things were operationalized. But the events that I found super helpful was, first off, one I already mentioned was Tony Robbins Business Mastery. That was a great all-around experience that was very general and specific information information about how to think about growing a business or scaling a business or, mastering business. And I definitely enjoyed that. The 10X events provided by Grant Cardone and Brandon Dawson, Natalie Dawson, those were super helpful. They were very strategic. They went through a lot of the nitty gritty things of like, this is how you manage people. This is how you write out a mission statement. This is how you create values that align with what you're trying to do with your organization. I cannot speak highly enough of that organization. When I went to their events, I definitely got a lot of value. And I remember the first, true story, the first Grant Cardone event I went to, I was a little skeptical because I'm just like, he's a very strong salesperson and is how he comes across in his personalities. And I remember I recommended him to another friend who's a business owner who's going into the space and doing roll-ups. And when I recommended him, he's like, bro, I would never go to one of his events. Really? You got value from it? I said, yeah, absolutely. And I just thought it was funny because he's like, dude, he's just so loud and in your face. He's not my type of guy. I was like, I know, but it was a very helpful event, and they actually got down to the nitty gritty and all the things that you need to know about how to actually scale and run a business. They don't give you a manual on it. And so I found it very helpful and hands-on for just the basic questions of what do you do in this situation, or what do you do in this scenario, or how do you create an employee handbook that has, the important, what do you actually need to put in there? This is our current employee handbook. Is this good? Or what do we need to add? And so it was all the things that you need to really actually grow and scale a business and create stability in an organization. And then the third was I went to Alex Hormozi's acquisition.com event, which I found tremendously valuable. And I will, continue to take lessons from all of these. And Alex's event was just very impactful because he talked a lot about marketing constraints versus sales constraints and just identifying, what types of constraints you have, and also how to think about your business through the eyes of an investor or, an acquiring company that is looking to value your business as an asset versus thinking about it as a business owner or a small business owner that's doing everything, and how to eliminate risk. And it was for anyone who's looking to sell their business, going to Alex Hormozi's. And I was super nervous to go to that just because I was strapped at the time. And so spending I think it was $3,000 or something at the time for the ticket I went to for the weekend. I don't want to say it was a stretch. It was I had, the space on a credit card, but I was trying not to spend money on things I didn't need to, but I did get a lot of value out of that. And it was super helpful in understanding, how people that are buying your company that are professional business acquirers, meaning people that are looking to buy a business that maybe represent a private equity group, how they look at and how they value a business and how they value different types of revenue differently. It was very interesting, and it was I felt very high level event. So that was very unique. And again, going to Tony Robbins Business Mastery, I can't say, enough things. I've been to that event several times, and it's been very helpful every time. So hopefully you got value from this content. And again, I'm, sharing this experience with you definitely from a place of vulnerability. So hopefully you received value from that, from someone who's actually sold their business. And it wasn't for some crazy multiple or crazy number. It was literally because I wanted out, and I'm just opening up about it. Because if you're going through something similar and you're thinking, hey, it might be time to, cut bait, I just want you to know you're not alone. And there's a lot of people that go through similar situations, but there are resources out there to help you operationalize your business so that you can actually exit with grace. And if you're looking to exit, as I mentioned earlier, there is a link in the description where you can request more information from one of the brokers we work with. And if you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button for the algorithm and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And we'll catch you on the next episode.